I'm supposed to be talking about books.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Just another struggling writer. The Beleaguered Author's one-stop shop for commiseration and hopefully inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. Well, today is the start of another reading vlog, and the last couple of weeks I've actually felt pretty good about my reading, even though I've had a couple of DNFs and some of the books I've been reading are on the shorter side. I do feel like I'm making pretty good progress on climbing out of that horrible reading slump that devoured most of my spring. Last week I read a couple of books, I DNF'd a couple of books, but this week I am aiming for a completely different set of expectations. The main book I'm going to try and finish this week is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is my random TBR draw for the week, and I am already just over 100 pages in, so not quite a third. And so far I'm enjoying it. It hasn't grabbed me in the same way that Foundry Side did by the same author. And I blame that mostly on the fact that I just find Sherlock Holmes type characters just a little bit of a difficult pill to swallow. They're not my favorite. It's just something to do with the overt quirkiness of the characters, how rude they can be, and just how perfect they are at their jobs. And how they get away with so much. If you're going to write a Sherlock Holmes character, I like it to be subverted in certain ways. I'm not far enough into this one yet to see if the Sherlock Holmes character is going to have some expectations subverted, so I'm not going to make a judgment call there yet. I just know that these aren't my favorite types of characters, nor the dynamic with the Watson type character tends to be my favorite, again, unless it's subverted. Not such the case here so far, but I'm hopeful that it gets better because I do like the writing. Robert Jackson Bennett can write his ass off, and the setting is really cool. It's got a plant-based magic system, love that, and Empire, which is constantly at odds with these like sea monsters that are trying to break through the sea walls. I'm not really sure what happens when the sea monsters break through. Like, can they go on land? What happens? I'm not really clear on that yet, but that is something that's been at the back of my mind. Like, these great leviathans are sea creatures. They are bashing through the sea walls, and then what? Do they climb up on the land and do what? I'm not sure, but enjoying it so far. Next book up in my library reads is The Butcher of the Forest by Premi Muhammad. And this is a novella about a woman who is tasked by her tyrannical leader to venture into the forest to rescue his two children who have wandered in there by mistake. The only problem is no one who goes into this forest comes out alive, except our main character, who had to do it once to rescue another child. And so she has been tasked to perform the same miracle and do it again. Again, this is a novella, so I anticipate reading it pretty quickly. I've already read the first 20 pages, and I am liking it. I like the idea, I like the main character, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest holds. But I do anticipate finishing this probably tomorrow. That being said, tomorrow is Meet the Teacher night and swimming lessons, so if I don't finish, I wouldn't be surprised either. But either tomorrow or Tuesday or whenever, when I do finish it, the next book out of my library holds that I'm going to be reading is The Hurricane Wars by Tia Guanzan, and the only thing I know about this is it is a enemies to lovers romantasy, and a true enemies to lovers, I hope, romantasy. From the description, it sounds like these two characters are literally on opposite sides of a war, so I'm hoping that bears out and it's not just like, oh, we're enemies for 3 pages and then we get along, but we'll see. Romantasy is not always my bag. I'm trying to be more open-minded about it, so we will see how that one goes. Those are the 3 books that I'm going to be focusing on this week. I hope to finish all of them, but especially The Butcher of the Forest and The Tainted Cup. And then if we finish The Tainted Cup, at least we'll have another draw out of the Mimic. So school is back in this week. I've got a bunch going on, so my reading may take a dip. I hope not, But we'll just have to see how it goes. And I will check in with you tomorrow to let you know how my crazy Monday went. Hey everyone, checking in for a quick reading update. Today I did indeed finish The Butcher of the Forest by Premi Muhammad. And this one is hard for me to rate because I think it's a fantasy horror, and as we have established by now, horror just isn't it for me, at no fault of the genre. By all means, no fault of the genre. The fact that it's also a novella, it just, in some ways I appreciated it because it meant that I was just able to fly through it and just absorb the details without getting bogged down in what would probably have been unnecessary in the end. But also I don't know that I was bored, but I was just like, I guess I was bored. But again, I don't think that's necessarily a fault of the writer, the writing, the book, the story. I think it's just me. Because there were elements, I think the writing was good, and I think the story idea was good, and I have no idea if the horror elements were good because they don't work on me. And the ending was probably appropriate for horror, a little bit disappointing for me. I think I would have liked it if I did like horror as a genre, though. I think. So again, like I said, this is just hard for me to gauge. I'm going to probably slot it in right at 3, because again, even though I wasn't super entertained, I also acknowledge that this is in no way the fault of the book or the writer. I don't know why I keep picking up horror books knowing that I'm not going to completely enjoy them with my whole heart. I want to like them so bad. I think that's what it is. I just want to. I want to like them. So I finished that, got it back to the library. So my next library read is going to be The Hurricane Wars by Tia Guanzon. I know this is it might be young adults, I'm not sure. Romantasy, enemies to lovers, yada yada. Normally not my cup of tea, but we'll see. The thing about my library, the library stuff right now is I'm not finding a lot of books that are jumping out at me, and so I'm just grabbing whatever is moderately appealing, and unfortunately a lot of those are romantasies and or young adults and or these fantasy horrors apparently. And I've got some books on hold, and that's the other thing is a lot of the series and things I'd like to start, the first book and the first entry in the series has always got a hold on it, so I have to put them on hold, and I'm maxed out on my holds. So I am forcing myself to pick up other books that aren't quite as interesting. Anyway, in some ways, I like expanding my horizons and reading books that I know won't necessarily be to my taste. No book for a writer is truly a waste of time because you learn so much about craft. Even in the books that you hate, you can learn what you don't want to do, what you don't want your story to be like. You can learn about craft in the way how twists are foreshadowed and how they are revealed, or character arcs that you enjoy or don't enjoy. So in that way, I don't feel like any of these books are a waste of my time, but I would love to hit on a book that I really, really, really love. Gonna give The Hurricane Wars a try. And then I also got to just over the 40% mark of The Tainted Cup, and this one I am enjoying. It's rating at about a 4 right now. While the Holmes and Watson stuff hasn't necessarily eased up, the last chunk that I read was when they were apart, and the main character Din, who is the Watson character, was doing a really great job at what he was supposed to be doing in this last 60 pages. So that made me enjoy at least this last chunk a lot. I will say my biggest gripe, bigger than the Holmes and Watson character dichotomy, which I have said before doesn't really appeal to me. Even more than that, my biggest problem with this book is how often Robert Jackson Bennett describes the Holmes character as grinning. Oh my God. I wish I had the ebook version so I could search for the word. Probably a good thing that I don't, because I feel like knowing the number would make me crazy. But it's a lot. It's a lot. That should have been word searched and refined down. Actually, it probably was, come to think of it, and this is the result, which alarms me. But it's definitely a crutch word in the way that he is describing the Holmes character, and I just wish that we get it. She's manic and unhinged and a little creepy. Please stop. But that's a minor gripe in the grand scheme of things. I know it's silly, but as I was just saying, when you're reading books as a writer, you tend to pick up on those crutch words and a lot more than I think probably the average writer does. And I do sometimes wonder if my enjoyment of editing and that side of writing makes me a worse reader because I can't turn it off all the time. But like I said, that's a minor gripe. I'm still really enjoying it, trending at about a 4. The murder mystery is fascinating. I've not enjoyed a murder mystery in a fantasy book like this before, so I'm enjoying it. I look forward to finishing it. I anticipate finishing it this week, hopefully before the weekend hits, and then I can draw another book out of my Mimic, because that has been extremely motivating. I love this idea that I have had to only draw one book at a time, because I feel like I want to get through the draws to find out what the next one is. And so, like, the last one, yes, it was a DNF, but I don't know, like, after the first, 25 pages of that one, I don't know that I would have continued slogging through into the point that I did DNF so quickly if it wasn't for the motivation of let's just get through it so I can do another draw. I'm enjoying this process. I'm enjoying the fun of the random draws. I know we're only about a third of the way through the month, but I'm hoping that this is a successful reading month, the likes of which I've not seen since January. But I read 10 books in January. I don't know that I'm going to get there this month, but I'm already at 4 if you count Trader's Blade, which I am. And so if I finish this one by Friday, that will put me at 5 at the halfway point of the month. So maybe. The problem is that 2 of those 3 were novellas. So, and I've already looked at the Hurricane Wars. It's over 400 pages. It's closer to 500. So, and this one is just over 4. So, am I cheating a little bit? Yes. Yes, I am. Am I ashamed of that? No, because I just went through a horrific reading slump. I'm not ashamed of it at all. Anyway, at this point, I'm just rambling. So I'm going to go ahead and get in bed, and I'm going to get some more of the Tainted Cup read, hoping to get to the 50% mark tonight. That would only be like another 25 pages. And then we will just see what tomorrow brings. Hello, everyone. It is now Wednesday evening, and I have quite a large reading update for you. I have done a bunch of reading today. First, I started my next library read. I kind of perused some of the ones that I have out right now, and I have settled on The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero Lacruz. If you recall, I had tried to read this one earlier in the year during my reading slump, and I soft DNF'd it because I just knew that it wasn't the right time for it. And today I decided whatever problems I have with the story or the writing, I can power through them. And I was right. I got to about the 15% mark, about 80 pages. And I don't know that I can say that I'm liking it. There are elements that I do enjoy. I love the kind of animalistic humanoids that make up some of the cast of characters and the races in this setting. I myself have a story idea that I feel like I say this a lot, especially lately. I do have a lot of writing ideas that I haven't gotten to, but I promise I'm not just making this up. I do have a story where there are similar animalistic humanoids, including one that is almost exactly the same, believe it or not, as in this book. But so I do like that. I'm grateful that she is forging that path ahead of me, because I was always nervous about like, oh, is this going to seem too silly or video gamey? And I think I'm liking elements of the plot. One of our main characters it seems so far that she's been kind of roped in to be the underling of like an evil sorceress, and like flagrantly so. Like, this lady is on her shit, and it's her granddaughter who she has invited in and basically manipulated the characters, which is our main character, like her feelings of wanting to be included and belonging and loved, to like make her do her bidding, but she's quite seriously not on some shit. So I kind of like that aspect of it, and I have always wondered what it would be like to read a book from the point of view of a character who is outwardly not that bright. And I kind of see elements of that here. I don't know how that will bear out for the rest of the book. Like I said, I'm only 15% in, so it makes sense that our main character is not completely aware of everything that's going on. So I do find that kind of interesting. We have a second POV character who is not as interesting, or at least she may not be, because we just haven't been given much of her perspective. And that brings me to something I don't know that I do like so far, is that we've been so heavily in the perspective of one character, but not nearly as much in another. And it's not, so it's an uneven balance. And it's also, I don't see the connection between jumping between the two. Like, it doesn't seem to make much sense where the cuts are happening. So that feels weirdly paced. But again, I'm only 15% in. Maybe that will get better. I hope so. I'm just glad that I managed to push through whatever was holding me back from reading into it more the last time. Like I said, about 15%. I'm going to continue to plug away at that. My goal is to have this finished by Sunday. And then, more excitingly, I straight up finished the Tainted Cup today. I probably should have updated yesterday when I was at about 50%, but I was having some struggles with the video that I was recording and editing, and it ended up being like 1 o'clock in the morning before I finally finished with that. And I was like, I can't do any more recording tonight. And then today I was just like, well, I'm just going to read 100 pages and then I'll update. But 100 pages put me smack dab in the middle of the climax, and then I just couldn't stop reading. So I finished it. And I gotta say, I liked it. I think I would even say that I liked it a lot. My complaints at the beginning with the Sherlock Holmes type character did not bear out to be as insufferable as I feared in the beginning. I think that Robert Jackson Bennett probably leaned into all of the parts that I didn't like in the beginning to kind of get her established. And then after that, she eased off. It wasn't nearly as overt or in our faces or constantly commented on. It was just established. I will say though, the problem with the grinning, which I think I mentioned last time, persisted. Get a new adjective. I'm so sorry. That was so, every time I saw it, I was just like, stop. Make her have another expression. She doesn't have to be grinning and use a different word. Anyway, that's a petty complaint. I really liked the murder mystery, and I really, really liked Din, the main character. He was flawed, he was talented, he was good as a person, but also as an investigator, while also having issues that held him back, and, you know, also just being very young and green and unsure of himself. I loved that this established, yet again, a queer romance. I actually think I liked this queer romance more than the one in Foundry Side. I think this one felt a little bit more natural. Again, the murder mystery, the ending to the murder mystery was not quite as satisfying as I was hoping. I don't really know why, though. I can't quite put my finger on what I was hoping for. There were some twists that I guessed. There were some that took me by surprise. But there was just something about it, like, I just wish it had gone in a different way. I couldn't even tell you what that is. So that even seems petty to complain about. As I was thinking about what I'm going to rate it, I was thinking about maybe like a 4 or a 4.5. And I was dwelling about which way to go. It made me think of what I have been doing all evening, which is read this book. And it made me think of a couple days ago when I was reading this book, laying in bed and just reading. You may not know this about me, but I was a voracious reader as a kid. And then as I became a teenager, it fell out of I just stopped doing it, and eventually it was largely replaced by just playing video games. That became my preferred medium. And over the last 6 years or so, I have been trying to get back into a healthy reading habit. The original impetus was knowing that if I want to be a fantasy writer, I need to be well read. I need to know the conventions of the genre. I need to know the titans of the genre. I need to have comps in my genre. I need to be well read in my genre. And I just, up until that point, and still currently, was not and am not. And it kind of alarmed me that I would be, in theory, querying agents without even knowing what else is out there, what else my book might be comparable to, what else, you know, if someone else has written a book like it, or if I'm pitching a book that's already, you know, been done 6 Ways from Sundays in the last 2 years. And that has not been a very good motivator to get me to read. I was reading somewhere from like 2018 up until last year. I was reading like 10 or 15 books a year at best. And then last year, as I started the year wanting to do a podcast about books, and that eventually morphed into what I'm doing now. And because of those motivating factors, those content creation things that I was leaning on, I knew I needed to read more, else I would have nothing to talk about. So last year, I think I like doubled the year before, which came out to 35 books, I think. And that to me felt huge. But I even then knew that I could and should do more, especially if I wanted to sustain a channel like this. But it has been a very long time since reading felt like a real hobby to me. It has long felt like an obligation that I have to fulfill in order to do this, or to do writing well. It has always just been a step that I have to fulfill, much like driving to work or opening my computer and running Excel spreadsheets or whatever, part of the job of making content and writing. And starting last week with A Deadly Education and moving into this week with The Tainted Cup, it has felt fun. Instead of spending my evenings at my computer playing video games, my hobby was reading. It was my leisure activity. Yes, I'm making content. Yes, I need to read these books, as an aspiring fantasy writer. But it was no longer just an obligation. It was truly for the desire to read, the desire to know what comes next, the enjoyment of the book itself. And when I realized that I was laying in bed on a regular Wednesday evening after the kids had gone to bed, I could do anything I want with my evening. I've met all my other obligations. What I chose to do was read. I had already read almost 100 pages before that with The Sun and the Void. I didn't need to commit myself to reading another 200 pages. I could have said I can do that Thursday or Friday, but I didn't. I chose to lay in bed and read. And that, to me, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that feels like such a huge step that I can truly say I have reclaimed reading as a hobby instead of just an obligation that I am doing to make myself a better writer and a content creator. And so with that in mind, I am leaning towards the 4.5 more than the 4. It wasn't quite a 5 just because of those little nitpicks that I had, and it didn't give me quite the same feeling that Foundry Side did, but I really enjoyed this. I really did. I love the world. I love the magic system. Again, I love Din, our main character. And Anna, the Sherlock Holmes type character, is tolerable. I just hope Robert Jackson Bennett finds a thesaurus before the next book. But very, very good. Very good. I am a little mad that I have to wait for the next one. So I finished another TBR book. I have not had a reading month like this since February, so I am so stinking excited, and even more so because I get to choose another book. I'm as stunned as you are, guys. I can't believe we're getting to do a third one and it's only the middle of the month. I have decided that I am going to aim for a physical book. I think the system I have worked out where I am reading my physical books when I'm at home and then reading my digital library reads while I'm chaperoning kids places or whatever is working. I'm getting through a lot of library reads. I'd like to keep it that way. So unless I draw a digital read that I have been really wanting to, there's a couple that I have in mind. I'm going to try and stick with the system we have, which is a physical read. Let's see. Okay, this is another really recent one, so I imagine it's a physical read I'm looking for, 184. Okay, so 184 did indeed come out to a physical book, and it is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross, and I'm pleased with this. I'm going to stick with this one. I have been hoping to have an excuse to get to this one. I hear a lot of great things. I did read Divine Rivals earlier this year, which I won't get into too much because I believe the St. Martin's Press boycott is still on. Needless to say, I enjoyed her writing. I know this one is also a duology. I don't have a Fire Endless, but if I like this one, I will be certainly picking it up. So this will be my next TBR read. I just cannot believe the string of good luck I have had with my reading lately. That's not true. It's not luck. It's just fervor. I cannot believe the fervor I have had to read lately. I can't wait to find out what my numbers were going to be at the end of the month. And also, I've made up 3 books on my pace to make my 75 book goal at the end of the year. I think I was down 7 as of 2.5 weeks ago. Now, granted, I read 2 novellas and DNF'd, but counted one at 67% towards my goal. So there is that. But I just finished a 400-page book in less than a week. And I'm hoping to get like a 500-page book done before the end of the week. And this one isn't that short. It's pretty chunky. Yeah, 463 pages. So if I can get this one done pretty quickly, I'll feel good about it. Man, what a great week I am having reading-wise. So tomorrow I am looking forward to continuing with The Sun and the Void, and then I will also hopefully get started on River Enchanted, and I will let you know all about it. Hello everyone, I am back with a quick reading update. It is now Sunday afternoon, and I'll admit that my reading has fallen off a little bit the last couple of days. In my defense, I have had a house guest for my daughter's birthday. So Saturday was a little bit of a black hole of productivity, but I knew that it would be. So I'm really not that pressed. Birthday cake. But I have made some progress in the 2 books that I am currently reading, so let's talk about it. First, I have made it to about 40% of The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero Lacruz. I don't know why that tongue ties me every time. And I have some thoughts. The first being that the pacing in this book is very weird. The story is told from 2 perspectives, but one was very clearly favored, and for a long time I wasn't really sure why we were getting the second perspective. It has only just been made clear how she is going to tie into the other plot, but I still don't know what her story is. I see now kind of the shape of where it's going, but it shouldn't have taken, in my opinion, to 40% to make that revelation. I also think that this book is a little bit bloated. I'm not really sure what you could cut though, other than maybe winnowing down the second perspective. I'll have to read the rest to figure out if I think this second perspective is even necessary. But it's over 500 pages, and I just feel like I'm kind of slogging through it. I'm committed to finishing it, but I think if I was in a little bit more dire straits with my reading, like feeling slumpy or otherwise needing to finish a bunch of books in a row, even though I kind of do, I'm still 4 books behind. I don't know that I would finish it. I am committed to finishing it this time. I hope to try and have it finished by Tuesday. I'm going to put that out there right now. By Tuesday, today's Sunday afternoon, I'm going to try and get this book finished. I have just under 300 pages left, and I think that's doable in 2 days, even with work and everything going on. But right now it is sitting at about a 3. There are elements that I like. I think I mentioned before the fact that the animalistic qualities of some of the races I enjoy. I'm getting a nice kind of perspective on how to incorporate them into the story where they appear that I'm writing. Well, not writing, it's on my list. And then I also kind of like the main character, Reina's path. She's coming from a place of just wanting to be accepted and loved because she is a member of a former slave race that is still being very much discriminated against in this world. And her father died, her mother died, she's all alone in an environment that is hostile to her. And she receives an invitation from her grandmother to come join her at her estate or where she's living, only to discover that her grandmother is kind of evil. And yet that desire to be accepted and loved overrides that sense of right and wrong. And I kind of like that. Reina herself is not coming from a place of malice, and yet she is doing undeniably horrible things in pursuit of earning love and acceptance. And I find that really interesting. I think I mentioned, and I can't remember if I mentioned last time, that I have kind of wanted a story where a female main character is just dumb. So often we are given main characters where they tell us in the text that they're smart, and yet their actions don't feel very smart, or that they miss hints that are made obvious to the reader, and so the reader feels smarter than the main character. And so to be told as a reader that the main character is smart, it doesn't make me feel smart, it just makes the character seem dumb, if that makes sense. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves when I read. And so I have kind of been hoping to read a book where the main character is just kind of dumb. And I don't know that I would call Reina dumb necessarily. Like I said, she's coming from a place of just kind of ignoring the bad shit, not really even ignoring it, but kind of compartmentalizing the bad shit in pursuit of her ultimate goal of being loved and accepted. But also there is an element of she's just not that bright, and I like that. So there are elements of the story that I do like. I just feel like, I don't know if I'm vibing entirely with the writing style, and it does feel kind of like a slog to get through. I've been reading this for like 4 or 5 days now, and I'm only 250 pages in. I feel like that's a pretty good indication of how much effort it takes to pick up and get through some of this book. I'm hoping now at this 40% mark, where the second character's perspective is kind of starting to make more sense, that it'll start to pick up a little bit in pace, but we'll just have to see. So that is The Sun and the Void. And then on Friday, I started reading A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. And I don't know what I expected from this book. I think I probably expected a female perspective, but we are mostly getting a perspective from a male main character, which, like I said, I don't think I expected. And I love him. I love Jack. I do. I feel really angry on his behalf, just some of the things that we've learned. I'm about 20% in, by the way. I don't think I mentioned it. I feel very angry on his behalf from some of the things that he suffered as a child, the discrimination that led him to kind of be acting out, which then led to more discrimination and eventually what he perceives as being cast out. Now, if that is truly what happened, because he was forced to leave the island when he was 11 to go to school to be a bard, he perceives that as being cast aside and thrown out. Whether or not that's truly the case, I imagine we'll learn later on, but he is coming from a position where he was not wanted. He was a burden. He was troublesome. He was very much outcast by the inhabitants of this island where he lived, and he's now being called back and asked for his help from the very same people who kind of demonized him and terrorized him and made him feel unloved and unwanted. So I feel the petty bitch in me is like, I wouldn't do shit to help y'all. Fuck you. But he, being a better person than me, is. And so I am happy to bear that indignation on his behalf. Not really much else to say about that. Like I said, I'm only about 20% in. I like the writing. I knew that I would. I've read another Rebecca Ross book this year already. That wraps up this reading vlog. Thank you so much for watching. I had intentions of doing a video this week where I completely reorganize and redecorate my writing space, but it's just not going to work. I'm just not going to have time this weekend. I think I'm going to save that for here in a couple of weeks. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to bring you next, but I hope you look forward to it, and I will see you then. Bye.